Mr. Mamdani goes to Washington. New York City's mayor-elect is at the White House today meeting with President Trump, who has repeatedly called him a communist. I'll talk to the Post's lead White House reporter Stephen Nelson about what to expect from the visit. Plus, President Trump's Peace Council. It's a key part of a new 28-point peace plan to hopefully end the war between Russia and Ukraine. I'll give you all the details. Those stories and more today, Friday, November 21st. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. Here's what we know about that 28-point peace plan confirmed exclusively to the Post last night to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. This is the most detailed picture yet of how the Trump administration thinks it can help end the incursion that began in February of 2022. The broad strokes of what's in the deal include territorial freezes, caps on the number of troops, economic reintegration for Moscow, and a peace council that will be chaired by President Trump. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff constructed the plan after weeks of meetings with Russian and Ukrainian officials. A U.S. official told the Post that one of those Ukrainian officials, who was one of the most senior members of President Zelensky's administration, quote, agreed to the majority of this plan, and he made several modifications to it. That said, neither Moscow nor Kyiv had commented publicly on the plan as of Thursday night. A former Republican aide in New Jersey is being accused of perpetrating a really bizarre political hoax. Seriously, this is a weird one. The aide, who had worked for Congressman Jeff Van Drew, allegedly had a fetish artist, I guess that's a thing, mutilate her body using a scalpel, then had an accomplice write the words "Trump whore" on her stomach, and then claimed she had been attacked. Federal prosecutors aren't calling that whole peculiar ordeal an attack at all, but instead a staged political stunt. 26-year-old Natalie Green was arrested this week and charged with masterminding the bogus attack in a Jersey Shore nature reserve back in July. Green claimed 3 gun-wielding men approached her and a friend on a trail at about 10:30 at night. She said they threatened to shoot her and then struck her in the head. Her attackers hogtied her with black zip ties and held her down while slashing her face and body, before adding the message about the president because of her job, or at least that's the tall tale she allegedly told investigators. Now, Green is a law student at Rutgers University and, like I mentioned, previously worked for Van Drew. She now faces up to a decade behind bars if she's found guilty. President Trump lashed out at 6 Democratic lawmakers who made a video aimed at the U.S. military that said, well, listen.
The threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution.
The president, if you couldn't guess, wasn't happy, and he didn't hide it. He posted on Truth Social in part, each one of these traitors to our country should be arrested and put on trial. Now, the Dems in the video are Senators Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan and Mark Kelly of Arizona, alongside Representatives Chris DeLucio and Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania, Maggie Goodlander of New Hampshire, and Jason Crow of Colorado. All 6 of them have military or national security backgrounds. Something that the president also said in that Truth Social rant led to a tense exchange with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. The president truthed these words, quote, seditious behavior punishable by death. And Leavitt was asked if the president was calling for the execution of members of Congress. She said no, but added this.
To suggest and encourage that active duty service members defy the chain of command is a very dangerous thing for sitting members of Congress to do. And they should be held accountable. And that's what the president wants to see.
New York City Mayor-Elect Zohran Mamdani has been called all sorts of names by President Trump, his favorite being communist, but he'll get a new one today. Oval Office guest. The president will sit down with the man who will soon run the country's most populous city to, as a spokesperson for Mamdani told the Post, quote, discuss public safety, economic security, and the affordability agenda that over 1 million New Yorkers voted for just 2 weeks ago. But what is the White House saying about the meeting? To answer that, I'm joined now by the Post's Washington correspondent, Stephen Nelson. So, Stephen, let's start there. Is the White House echoing Mamdani's office in regards to what the meeting's going to be about?
The White House has actually been incredibly coy about what this meeting is going to look like. We don't know if the meeting is going to be open or closed. We don't know if President Trump is going to be coming in guns blazing, very aggressive, or if he's going to be trying a more cordial approach with Mamdani. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt asked, when she was asked about this, she said that a communist is coming to the White House. She was echoing President Trump's remarks, but President Trump has himself vacillated between approaches with Mamdani. He announced that he was coming to the White House on Truth Social, and he said that Zohran Kwame Mamdani is coming, apparently calling out his African heritage. We don't know where exactly that's going. It might be insinuating that he plans to attack his claim to be African American on college applications. We frankly don't know there. That might just be people reading into it. But he also has said that he hopes that he's successful and that he hopes that the city, his hometown, is successful as well.
It's always interesting when the president meets with someone who he's been adversarial with because, everyone's kind of brave when the person's not in the room. But sometimes when they're in person, it just seems much friendlier, much more buddy-buddy. So I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on what exactly is going to go down. Now, besides calling him a communist, as we just said, what has President Trump said about Mamdani actually running New York? I know you mentioned it briefly there that he hopes that he does a good job, but do we know if there's any kind of real support there? Does the president have any plans for his own hometown here in the Big Apple?
Well, President Trump has talked about how he wants New York to be better about public safety. That's something he mentions frequently, people being shoved in front of subways or mugged on the streets. Mamdani, in his remarks ahead of the meeting, said that he wants to talk about public safety and also affordability. Frankly, if properly pitched, you could see some agreements there.
Yeah.
President Trump, though, has ordered the National Guard into various cities across the country as part of a crackdown, and that's something that, optically probably wouldn't be very welcome in New York. In some ways, their disagreement is a branding matter. Mamdani proudly calls himself a socialist, and President Trump is obviously a conservative. But both have discussed those two buckets. President Trump is right now considering giving $2,000 checks to people he calls low or middle income earners out of his tariffs. That's a matter of affordability. That's a matter of arguable redistribution to lower income people. But in some ways, the fight between the two is good politics. President Trump wants to paint the Democratic Party nationally as socialist, as Mamdani describes himself, and he wants to associate this rising star within the party with socialism or communism, as he likes to say. And Mamdani himself, he represents a very heavily Democratic electorate, and he was very defiantly opposed to President Trump during the election, and that swept him to victory. And so maintaining his own standing in the city, posturing himself against President Trump is useful there as well.
Yeah, and Mamdani is serving somewhat as a poster child for a new wave of the Democratic Party, the furthest left, of the party in politics. And so to see how they're going to interact will be somewhat of a test case for how the president will interact with that type of Democrat as we roll into the new year and the upcoming midterms. Now, before I let you go, I want to pivot a bit to a new Fox News poll that found 46% of Americans believe President Trump's economic policies have hurt them. Now, the president has doubled, tripled down on blaming Biden for this, but Americans in growing numbers seem to believe that it's really a Trump problem. So has the White House said anything about these new numbers?
Well, of course, the economy, if it's doing well or doing poorly, it has significant electoral impacts. Next year, what the White House and prominent Republicans are focused on are the midterms and hoping to retain control so that the final 2 years of President Trump's term are not consumed in investigations and impeachment attempts and roadblock to all legislation. We have difficulty predicting what is going to come out of the economy. If you talk to Trump allies, they say he has raked in trillions of dollars in foreign investment pledges. That the tariffs maybe were just a one-time bump in inflation and not a huge one at that. and that the economy could be roaring by the time that there's the midterms. They pointed to a good job stated today, despite the government shutdown. But at the same time, whoever's in charge and whoever's in power gets the blame for the pain. And you saw that with the government shutdown, where Democrats in the Senate blocked spending legislation that forced the temporary furlough of millions of federal workers and caused a lot of economic pain. And President Trump and Republicans took the heat for that in polls and in the off-year elections, in which Mamdani was among the victors.
This just brings back that point of affordability that you mentioned with, Mamdani and Donald Trump potentially finding some common ground there. I think that affordability come 2026 is going to be the political buzzword that we will not be able to get away from. So thanks for breaking that all down for us.
Thank you.
Now, before I get to this next story, I need any younger listeners to leave the room. I have a special message from Santa Claus that only moms and dads can hear. Mom, Dad, we good? Okay. The Grinch has gone AI to steal Christmas this year. The Post spoke to a mom whose son had Santa ruined for him, all thanks to Google's AI. Little Leo asked Google how much Santa spent on each kid. A pretty smart question for a little mind and quite helpful when you're making your list for the big guy. Well, Google spit back, quote, "There is no set amount Santa spends per child. He is a fictional character." Gee, thanks, Scrooge. Well, Leo had the only reasonable reaction one could have in this case. He cried his little eyes out and gave the bot the middle finger. To kill the holiday spirit even more, the Post reached out to Google, and I'm sorry, but their response? Naughty list for sure. They told us that the AI bot, which generates those kinds of responses, pulls from top trending web content. In other words, it's not our fault, it's the internet's. Bah humbug indeed. Maybe Leo should have flipped both birds there. And finally today, Meghan Markle. I need to preface this story too. Markle definitely got the short end of the stick when it came to how she was treated by the British royals and British press. With that said, girlfriend is not doing herself any favors to ingratiate herself on the other side of the Atlantic. Markle's latest eye-rolling incident came when she was interviewed for a cover story by Harper's Bazaar magazine. The kinda sorta royal met with the magazine's reporter in one of those big fancy brownstones on Manhattan's Upper East Side. And as the journalist entered the room, Markle had a staff member announce her by her royal title, the Duchess of Sussex, like the way the president gets announced walking into the State of the Union, only there was no one else in the room. It was just the two of them and some poor sap shouting, "The Duchess of Sussex," into a mostly empty space. Now, this interview was the second sit down in as many weeks. Before this one, the reporter met with Markle at Polo Bar in Beverly Hills. Quite the hotspot. There's one in New York. If you haven't heard of this, it's like impossible to get into. These two sat at a prime table at a prime hotspot where they could be seen by everyone. The interviewer called it a, quote, calculated choice. Ah, yes, the clear-cut decisions of someone who values their privacy and wants to live a quiet life out of the spotlight. Sure. I do not understand how these two, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, went from beloved to punchline so quickly. Truly a masterclass in PR don'ts. Speaking of don'ts, something you shouldn't do. Don't forget to like and follow the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube.